The Construction Playbook podcast with Pagabo in partnership with the Open University.
If you go back not very many years and somebody said that Legal & General would be entering the market as a house builder using off-site manufacturing methods, or major Japanese players looking to come into the market using MMC techniques to deliver housing, people just wouldn't have seen that coming.
Welcome to the Construction Playbook podcast with Pagabo in partnership with the Open University, with me, Gerard Toplass, the Group Chief Executive of Pagabo. Now, there are many challenges that face our sector, and today we're going to talk about MMC, that's modern methods of construction, and how they can help the UK build better and faster and greener, whilst also providing more sustainable and higher skilled employment. The Construction Playbook tells us we must harness skills to ensure our collective success, but how do we do this? What are the skills for MMC that it is talking about? So let's just think a little bit about housing. We need nearly 350,000 new homes per year, and we are building, at the last census, about 240,000 homes. So over 5 years, that means we are over 500,000 short.
The Construction Playbook podcast with Pagabo.
So today I have with me Stephen Wightman, the MMC lead of Faithful & Gould, and Keith Hayes, the National Framework Director from Graham Construction. So I think first, before we sort of jump into a discussion about MMC, it'd be useful to know what it actually is. So Stephen, can you give us a brief explanation, please, of what MMC is?
Sure. Thank you very much, Gerard. Well, I think the clue's in the title, Modern Methods of Construction. It's a method. It's a way of constructing. I always say to people, it's a process, not a product. It's really important that it's thought of in that sense, that it's a way of using the materials and processes that we have in construction, but doing them in a slightly different way. And it covers a wide spectrum of products or ways of doing things. So right from three-dimensional volumetric or modular build that a lot of people know, right through to things like bathroom pods, mechanical and electrical systems manufactured in factories, or even at the simplest end, something like a prefabricated chimney stack that you see on modern housing estates where they actually pre-assemble it and land it on top of the building on the roof structure. So it covers a wide range of things. The primary thing is to look at the benefits that it gives in terms of improving the production and the construction processes.
That's a good summary of that, Keith, but Stephen works for F&G. So that's a consultant, so it's a very good explanation from a consultant's approach. But as a contractor, a big contractor, can we just get your perspective on MMC and how you see it as well?
Well, firstly, I think Stephen's got the approach is right. People all too quickly just associate MMC with volumetric buildings, porta cabins, if you want to use a trade name almost. And the view that we take as an organisation and the journey we've been on has taken us to understand it to start from the briefing and scoping point. You might call it category zero, right through to site process innovation around using modern methods to delivery. So starting to stray into the realms of robotics, the things that help people deliver quicker and safer on site. There's a whole piece of work we're looking at around different components, platform-based designs, standardized designs, all of which contribute across the whole spectrum that Mark Farmer originally set out in the report he did for MHCLG.
I think it's worth mentioning there, Gerard, there were 7 categories within that original designation that Mark Farmer produced.
Yeah. 7.
From Cat 1, which is volumetric, through to Cat 7, which is site-based material improvements. I was actually on the part of the team that helped to develop that in the early stages when I was at SIG, and it was interesting that we were looking right across the spectrum of how to define it, because in actual fact, that was the first problem, is what is MMC? What's the definition?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a good pointer for people to look at if they want to know a bit more about it. If you look up CAS Consultancy's stuff on MMC, you'll find the definitions in there, which are quite useful as a background piece.
Yeah, so it's not just big Lego then? It's not big Meccano, big. Well, I'm showing my age there, I suppose.
Could be 3D Lego, could be 2D Lego, but I think some of the more interesting stuff is particularly around the mechanical and electrical services provisions, particularly around things like full 3, 4, 5-story riser shafts that people are now manufacturing. People like Crown House and others, where they're dropping into the prison service, for example. You're dropping in a 3-story riser, all fully plumbed and complete. And primarily, it's all about trying to reduce the interactions of site trades and reduce the time it takes on site to put things together and all those interactions between the people and the processes. That's the sort of the primary benefit.
Yeah, I mean, the way I sort of see it, and I use the big Lego analogy, Stephen, because it's just quite an easy one for me, but show my age, I guess. But for me, it's that factory approach, using sort of factory approaches which would hopefully deliver productivity, efficiency, nicer work environments, better skills, and hopefully do things more quickly, which is something, and at a superior quality as well.
I think the other big thing we shouldn't lose sight of in all of that is that you significantly have an opportunity to improve health and safety on site.
Yep.
Yeah, if we drag the health and safety piece in, we're talking about the construction playbook today. So everything we sort of talked about is around or centered around other themes inside the construction playbook. So health and safety, well-being, skills, innovation. So, you can see all of those really coming through in proper MMC. So, no, I think they're all very, very good points. So hopefully our listeners now have got a pretty good understanding of what MMC is. And they've also got a reference point for Mark Farmer's report as well to go away and look at.
Just one final point on that, Gerard. I think it's worth pointing out, just to emphasize Keith's point, that there are basically 6 process benefits of MMC: the speed, quality, sustainability, improved health and safety, reduced disruption on site, and increased predictability of program and cost and performance. And those are sort of the key, what I call the key project benefits. There are non-project benefits, which are things around ED&I, things around digital and the digital transformation piece, and also about productivity. But it's worth this sort of just referencing those are the key areas. And health and safety is an absolutely crucial one, and it all forms part of trying to improve the overall prospects for construction.
Yeah, and I think it's also fair to say our industry has always been very good at leading on health and safety, and I would say that all of the contractors, sort of big and small, are exceptional at doing that. So these improvements just continue that journey.
Indeed.
So that's good. Okay, I want to just sort of drag in that statistic I sort of quoted: 350,000 new homes per year. We're only delivering about 240,000, so that's a big gap. Is MMC the solution to that gap, or are there any other sort of barriers?
I think it's one of the solutions. The real thing for me is you've got to look at added volume. Are you going to actually convince the current existing stock house builders to build vastly more houses or greater quantity of houses? And I don't think that's going to be the case. So you're really looking at added volume, I think, here in the marketplace. And I do think MMC has a place to play. The important thing is not to make the round peg fit in the square hole. It has to be the right MMC process for the right project at the right time. And I think, as Keith said, it's that sort of looking at things very early and trying to work out what's going to fit, what's going to deliver value, because ultimately we have to look at a value proposition here right across the whole piece. Definitely it has a place. I think you will see increased take up. Will it completely replace traditional building in the house building sector? Absolutely not. But I think it will be a really strong added value proposition, particularly in certain sectors like built to rent, social housing. And a statistic I heard the other day, which might be of interest, this was a housing conference in South Wales, where somebody stated that of children born from today, 50% of those people will only ever live in rented property, either social or private, which is really quite a staggering statistic. So I think that's going to be something that's also going to drive a bit of change in this industry with the additional house building.
I think the other change that it's driving, Stephen, is that it's bringing new entrants into the market.
Absolutely.
If you go back not very many years and somebody said that Legal and General would be entering the market as a house builder using off-site manufacturing methods, or you would have major Japanese players looking to come into the market using MMC techniques to deliver housing, people just wouldn't have seen that coming. I probably didn't see that coming. Some of those shifts, people like IKEA becoming involved with it. So it will change the dynamics of that part of the industry. And some of the work that Pagabo have done around the future of construction has looked at those external forces now that will begin to reshape the way the industry we've all been in a long time delivers its projects.
I think the capital piece is interesting. If you look, Goldman Sachs with their investment in TopHat, you've got TDR Capital with their investment in Ilka. And yes, I think it is interesting with those new entrants. And they're also, personally, I believe others queuing in the background, waiting and just looking at this space at the moment and waiting to see what happens. And the Sekisui one you referred to, obviously with Urban Splash and the Sekisui investment, just recently announced another tranche of capital in there as well. So I think it is interesting times. That this is still a learning curve. I personally think we're starting to see the first change in output with some of the big announcements from one or two of the builders, schemes of 500, 600, 700 homes that people like Ilka are now announcing. So you're starting to see it gathering momentum and traction. But it has taken, perhaps 5 or 6 years since the first announcements from one or two of these people. But it is starting to gather momentum now, definitely.
Yeah, let me just throw in something a little bit controversial. Are we going to all be living in prefab houses like post-war? That's one question. And the second question, companies like L&G, who are almost like a poster company for this sort of industry, they aren't making any money yet. So how are we going to actually square that circle?
I think some of that is around changing public perception. You're absolutely right. If you talk to somebody about a prefabricated house, they immediately think of an airy home or the projects that have been riddled with defects that have been made off-site many, many years ago, or full of asbestos or whatever, or they think they're getting a porta cabin. And a lot of it is around changing perception. And I think once they become more common and people stay in them, they will realise that for the layman, they probably won't be able to work out that it was an off-site manufactured house. They're already in what you might term MMC with the extensive use of off-site timber frame. It's an aspect of MMC. They just don't see that. But at the moment, we traditionally clad it with brickwork on the outside. Yeah. And instead, that outer cladding may well have been manufactured in a factory. Yeah. So that's a change in mindset.
I think if you look at Scotland, I was up in Scotland last week. Nobody bats an eyelid about using a timber frame construction in Scotland. It's the norm. It's absolutely the norm because of the weather dependency and the reduction. I think the prefab question is always one that, in my career, Gerard, and how long I've been in this industry, it's one that we've always had thrown at the industry. What you have to remember is those prefabs were actually only designed to last between 10 and 20 years. And there are still some of them out there now delivering, in some cases, housing that people don't want to move out of. There are cases where people don't actually want to leave them. So I think there are a couple of things that are changing. I do think that the regulatory framework in terms of things like the building regulations, in terms of the understanding, so things like the BOPAS, the assurance processes, the warranty processes are far better than they ever were historically. I think also with some of these players coming in that they are starting to drive a different agenda. So I think it is different to the prefab. To pick up your point about people losing significant amounts of money, the general view in a manufacturing process is it's about 7 years. It's 7 years and 1 quarter generally from opening a facility to generating a facility that's actually producing a profitable product. If you talk to manufacturing engineers, they'll tell you that's where the process sits. So we're not quite there yet. What I'm starting to see from one or two of the players is actually a cost-effective, cost-competitive, and what looks like a more efficient manufacturing process starting to come out of those places as they are finding their feet and learning their way. But you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs.
No. The manufacturing process, I can see that. And, I've seen the MMC manufacturers, the way they're approaching. And you can see the innovation, particularly in that process, because manufacturing has always been very good at innovation. A contractor, Keith, it's moving part of your business away from your core as a traditional contractor. How do you see that? How do you feel about it?
Well, I think certainly for us as an organisation, we've delivered projects using MMC techniques for many, many years. And we do that in partnership with a tried and trusted supply chain that we work closely with. We're currently delivering a major £130 million student accommodation scheme in York in partnership with FP McCann and 2 major engineering services suppliers, using extensive MMC techniques. So over 70% of the project is off-site manufactured. And that's done as a partnership. We'll continue to work that way. I think the big change that's coming is that because the playbook is looking to provide longer-term pipelines, it's looking to provide visibility, and it's looking to encourage innovation in these new techniques. And for clients to consider those from the outset, it will allow both tier 1 contractors such as Graham and our key supply chain partners to invest, to innovate, and look at how they can improve process. And ultimately, that will should enhance the ability of all of us to increase productivity and profitability through the supply chain. Yeah. But it should also allow those manufacturers and partners to actually invest in increased capacity. When Stephen said, Ilka starting a 600 home site, that increase in volume will start to show benefits for them. I think one of the problems of MMC techniques is nobody's ever being able to see a certain enough volume or enough in front of them to really invest. And now you've got key government clients who are embedding it in what they do. You know, the MOJ they always have done, DFE there's an increased, very much higher emphasis now on it, MMC within the new hospital programme and other NHS construction that I think allows that forward-looking investment, but in partnership.
Stephen, Keith makes a really good point there, because he's talked about non-housing clients, and I think MMC very often can fall into the housing solution because of the nature of it. But the Construction Playbook does talk about it being open to all building in the public sector, actually on a comply or explain sort of basis is what they're doing. So, it'd be interesting to see. Tell me a little bit about any of the barriers which are possibly affecting or maybe sort of limiting how MMC is being adopted, particularly in non-housing areas.
I think you're absolutely right, Gerard, first of all, about those other sectors that have been using MMC for an extended period of time. And going back to those benefits I talked about earlier on, the reason primarily is because those benefits deliver real value. In the education sector, for example, speed of construction is a hugely beneficial process, as is the reduced disruption of an off-site process on the occupation of an existing occupied estate. The same goes for healthcare. The same goes for some of the other sectors like military accommodation and the MOJ. And interestingly, Keith talked about those sectors. We are currently looking with all of those clients about their work in that sector. The budget in 2017, I believe it was, actually mandated a presumption in favour of that. And what that's now drifted out into the marketplace is this idea that the comply or explain statement that you talked about. And we're seeing extensive requests now from clients to do what we're calling an options analysis. So we actually sit down with them and understand what all their project drivers are and run through a process of actually saying, well, this would suggest that your best approach is this. So your approach could be a mix of category 2 MMC system, that's panelized systems using category 5 elements, which is bathroom pods or prefabricated utility cupboards. So I think we're seeing a variety of solutions that are coming out of that space. And the non-house building bit is where most of the manufacturing space has been for a substantial period of time. So a lot of the off-site builders, whether they be panelized systems or in volumetric terms, have been doing a lot of work in that sector. So the market is dividing slightly, in volumetric particularly, because you are seeing people coming in and being specialist volumetric house builders. You are also seeing people who are saying, no, we will stick to our core activities of education, healthcare, barrack blocks, that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. The new entrants are mostly in housing, in volumetric, whereas in the other sectors, you're seeing it's a broader spectrum of people who've been here for a while. To pick up on your other point about the contractor, or Keith's point about contractor relationships, what I think we are seeing is some contractors taking a slightly different approach. They're taking a more open approach, a more collaborative approach, which is what you need to do to take on board MMC. Some of the traditional ways of working with that sort of very broken down contractual approach of 20 or 30 or even 40, 50 subcontract orders broken down to the smallest element and very much managed in that way. We're seeing the more sort of what I would call integrator based contractors taking a broader approach and working with their supply chain, defining the scopes much more precisely and actually letting people add value where they can. And I think that's one of the really crucial aspects is there's got to be a level of trust between the supply chain and the contractor. And just because the supply chain says this is not a good idea, the more progressive contractors are saying, well, they're not saying that because they just don't want to do it. They're saying that because they understand their process and we've got to believe them and we need to take that on board and manage it. Yeah. So I think you are seeing some changes in the way, and I think, the contractor market is a tough old place now. Carillion went down, NMCN went down a couple of weeks ago. It's still tough out there. And I think the more innovative and fleet of foot contractors who are taking a slightly different view are the ones who will survive.
Yeah. Let's bring Keith in on that then. Can I just ask you, Keith, about possibly what lessons, adding to what Stephen has said, but what lessons has the pandemic taught us that we can use in a transition to MMC? Has it changed the way we do things, which is benefiting possible future MMC?
I'm not sure that the pandemic has in itself per se, other than I think it's taught us that potentially you can do an awful lot of innovation without everybody actually being in the room at the same time. I think it's taught us the value of those close relationships. And when we were involved in delivering the Nightingale hospitals with Procure 22, everybody worked as one team. It didn't matter whether you worked for Kia or Graham or Interserve. People worked as one team. And it's taking that openness to work as a team down into your supply chain then.
Collaboration, that's your point, isn't it? Collaboration.
Yeah. So you are delivering as a single team, and you break down some of the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 barriers, and you understand that innovation can come bottom up. And I was in a meeting a week or so ago with some of our key MMC suppliers. And what was really interesting is that some of those suppliers who you might normally see as rivals are actually working together and looking at how they can develop systems and processes and products that can look to ensure the market has capacity to deliver what's going to be needed by the new hospital program, by the next stages of the DIO program, and looking at industry capacity. And it's probably taught people perhaps a little bit more of how to work together better.
I think it's also interesting, Gerard, on that, is I think we should see some growth in different contracting methods and perhaps some different contractual approaches, particularly perhaps around joint incentive and share contracts, which I think might be a really innovative approach.
Alliance contracting, you mean?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go back to what the DIO did with their SLAM procurement process back in the sort of early 2000s, when they were procuring the SLAM model, that was on what's called an MPTC, maximum price target cost contract, but that had joint incentive in there and share pain gain. And what that meant was that people were incentivized to work together. It wasn't just someone dictating working together. They were incentivized. And they were incentivized on the basis that if I help out that other contractor, the benefit to them that will come back into the share pot is greater than the pain that I will incur for making my life more difficult. Yeah. And at that point, people go, it's worth doing. So I think contractual approaches are an area also that could see some significant development over the coming years. And it plays into that playbook process about portfolio and longer term contracting and trying to create those relationships and joint incentive.
Yep. Yeah, it does talk about the construction playbook, talks about good contract management, and contract management starts at the beginning. It talks about early engagements, and the playbook is a constant theme between that. I mean, it'd be interesting to know from a technology perspective then, what role, I mean, I would have thought if there's a use for technology, MMC, particularly your process approach, Stephen, would be the best place to actually innovate. So Keith, I'll ask you first. Are you using technology? How are your supply chain using technology? How are you using it in MMC?
We use it right from the start of design of a project and taking a design for manufacture and assembly approach. So working using BIM as an ISO 19650 accredited contractor is embedded in all our processes. And we work with our supply chain to ensure that they meet our requirements, upskilling where necessary. So digital is embedded right from the initial design, right through to our checking and quality sign-off processes throughout construction and handover, and then the delivery of that all-important model into the CAFM system that the end user has for the building. So we're using QR-coded elements right back into our suppliers' factories. So we're checking, we're looking at quality right through. Everything's recorded digitally. There's a clear maintenance of the golden thread, and it allows us to have confidence that the buildings we put up are meeting the requirements of new legislation fundamentally, and asset management in the future.
Okay, is that easier, Keith, with MMC rather than traditional? Because obviously digital O&Ms have been around for some time. We don't use a lot of paper, I would hope anyway. But does your point about the technology, is it easier? Are you more efficient through MMC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Undoubtedly. Some of the work we've done showed that using BIM 360 Field through our quality checking processes on site made our teams 10 to 15% more productive.
Yeah, and so that is a really good example of combining both MMC and innovation and technology, because the software vendors are obviously innovating to try and follow your process, and that's sort of coming through. Stephen, I mean, you were involved in the supply side before you became a consultant, or involved in the consultancy side. I'd be interested to know your perspective on technology from both of those areas, really.
I think, well, Keith's point is interesting, and one of the things that I quite often say to people is, one of the reasons why BIM and the take-up of the digital piece seems to be higher within an MMC environment, or easier within an MMC environment, is Just the process of having to break the product down or the building down into smaller components from a pre-manufacturing point of view, you need a level of digital knowledge or digital work to get to that. You've got to have less interpretation. You may well have CNC machines producing certain components or elements. If you look at Lang O'Rourke's process in their factory in Worksop, their concrete's actually coming over from a computer batching plant in small skips into the table, and the shuttering's been placed by computer. So the level of digital knowledge and digital design needed in order to run the manufacturing process means that automatically feeds into the whole digital chain and the digital model. I think the other thing you're starting to see, we talked about the MMC definitions right at the outset. Two of the big benefits or big opportunities for what's called MMC categories 6 and 7, which are around labour and material improvements, is the use of things like RFID tagging, QR coding, the ability for things such as QR coding for labour control. So scanning yourself in and out of an operation as it's being carried out then provides far more information about whether that was done in the first place. It provides things like critical inspection points. It's hugely more efficient for people like inspectors to have a digital record of these processes have been completed, and I therefore need to go and check them and sign them off before the next operative comes in. So if you imagine in a 20-story tower block, the plumber's gone in to fit the bathroom on the 15th floor and they do their work and they QR code themselves out. The inspector instantly knows to do the pressure test on that particular, or observe the pressure test on that particular piece of work. So those kind of huge benefits around the digital piece. And then you've got things like the digital snagging tools, digital QR controls, which again, open protocols are allowing clients to see their processes in the manufacturer as well and opening up the whole working environment. A number of the manufacturers I know actually have live video feeds of their manufacturing processes that their clients can actually dial into. They'll give them access to that for their process so they can see what's happening. Okay. So I think you are seeing the technology is driving some significant benefits around that piece, and it's actually embedded in those MMC designations right at the outset. Still a long way to go, though. I think there's still the sort of next stage is still a little bit off.
2 points from that then. When you actually start to use technology in a process and you're moving a process from a traditional to in our sense, a modern method, skills is one thing that springs to mind, and also social value. Now, the playbook, again, he talks about skills and he's showing that skills are developed within our ecosystem and that we are measuring social value. Social value now, particularly with PPN 0620, is actually a fundamental part of our sort of sector now. So, Keith, are you finding you're having to invest more in skills, and are you measuring the social value of MMC differently to traditional?
I think there's two parts to the answer. If I deal with the second one first, in terms of social value, it can often provide a conundrum for clients. Particularly if you look at where the volumetric supply chain is located. It's very much in the eastern side of the country. It's out in East Yorkshire and
it's
those
in Hull,
areas
where we are today, Keith.
That's why I am where I am, Keith, because that's what I used to work in. That's why I live here.
Branders, Burton, all of these places are over in the east. You talk to a client about a project, say in the West Midlands, who has quite rightly wants to create employment and training and skills in their area. And you're saying that a big lump of their project is going to come from the east of England and be constructed, manufactured over there. So that creates some tension that you have to look at how you resolve by perhaps investing in other ways in the skill set and the STEM agenda and employment and training locally through the trades that you A, have control of, but B, perhaps those you can influence. So there's a need to look at how you deal with that, particularly if you're dealing with volumetric buildings. With the more componentized systems, as you go to standard systems and you go to components and assemblies or platform-based approaches, then the design should be such that you can actually manufacture those components anywhere. And you can be much more local in your procurement and delivery. So I think it provides challenges in that respect of social value. For the former that you asked about, investment and training in skills, I think the current skill shortages is driving that agenda anyway. There's a new generation of people coming into the industry who are already very computer literate, who are digitally aware, and who question why we do what we do in the way we've always done it, which I think is really good. And I think they are driving their own agenda around investment and changing the way we work and the way we invest in skills when they come into the industry. We're employing people in our business who've come from a background outside of the industry, but are digital experts, and they're working in our BIM teams. They're doing augmented reality, they're doing virtual reality, they're looking at things that traditionally as contractors we didn't do. And a lot of that is around the agenda for digitalization and our clients' agendas now, which again is in the playbook, around improving digital delivery, both in use and in construction.
I think those 2 points are very well made, actually, Keith. The skills one, the first one, I think that's extremely important. And I think organisations and industry bodies need to sort of, look at the way they deliver training, because just doing things in the same way and expecting different results is, as I understand, the definition of insanity. So we must sort of address that. Social value, just as a company ourselves, actually, we've been working with the DFT under the Times Living Lab, and we've developed additional features in our social value tools to measure traditional versus MMC. So sort of keeping up with that marketplace.
That's really interesting.
It's a piece of work we've been doing for a little while now, but that's an obvious shift, and you can see that in the marketplace.
I think the interesting, Keith is absolutely right. You're talking about a job in sort of a factory in Nottinghamshire or Lincolnshire or East Yorkshire. However, that's a sustainable job that will be there in the long term, because that's where the factory is based. And there needs to be a little bit of a broader approach here. The new Department for Levelling Up and Housing and Communities, which Mr. Gove is now heading up, it's interesting that they chose to actually rebadge that with the levelling up as the primary issue, because there is an opportunity with the use of offsite MMC processes to actually, dislocate the opportunity for the added value and the job from the location in which the building is located, and the ability to create sustainable long-term jobs in areas of greater need for employment, perhaps, rather than in the area where the end product might be needed. Plus, you have the carbon issue about traveling and the amount of travel and embodied carbon generated by the process of producing it. The challenge at the moment, as you quite rightly say, is the local pound problem. Surrey County Council or whoever it may be, I'm investing XYZ in this building and I'm really looking for local value. What I think needs to be thought about is a way of providing an offset on local value, as you suggested, Keith, whether that's by, reinvestment, but something I would look to the new department to say, can we find a way of creating value? We level up, we create jobs in an area of perhaps industrial deprivation or employment deprivation or deprivation need, but we provide benefit as an offset to that, to the local community in the area in which the construction is taking place, because they're not going to get those painter and decorator jobs or whatever they might be. I think the other thing that's worth thinking about associated with this whole skills process is there are some significant ED&I benefits associated with manufacturing processes rather than processes on site. Sites are difficult places to work. Sometimes they're very variable. Factories are more regular, and there are certainly, from an inclusivity perspective, there are opportunities around working in factories which offer greater levels of inclusivity for people with disabilities, whether they be audible, whether they be visual, whether they be learning disabilities, or people who have caring responsibilities that mean they can't work away from their local environment. It might be children, or it might be elderly parents or dependent relatives. So all of those are offering opportunities for people to remain within this industry and deliver value to construction, but within an environment where they're not having to be a peripatetic worker, where they're having to go to various places to do their job. It is a conundrum. It's one that I wrestled with regularly as a supply chain partner, because it was, we don't want to go volumetric because you're going to take too much of the work away from our local community. So absolutely a challenge, one that I think the government's got to look at and try and find ways of offsetting.
If you use the example of the York scheme that I mentioned earlier, that scheme directly, amongst Graham employment opportunities, provided 22 new jobs for people around York that are site-based. But within our off-site supply chain, that created 80 new jobs across 3 plants. So yes, we contributed directly in York, but it also produced 80 new starts across 3 plants for our supply chain. And that's a significant impact, not just in one place.
So Keith, that's exactly what our software measures, actually, exactly that point. And if you listen to the PM, he does actually, or he tells us that levelling up is about levelling up the whole country. And if you dig under it, I think he's trying to sell it a bit to the southern part of the UK to say, look, you might have to do some of the heavy lifting to help other parts of the country. And the MMC, to be fair, can actually sort of deliver part of that. But, everything you said, it's about not being selfish, I suppose, in those outcomes. Whether or not you need DLUC, I think that's how they're referring to it now, not MHCLG. Whether you need DLUC to develop an offsetting scheme similar to carbon offsetting for social value, that I think by the time they've calculated that, we could have moved on to a new policy. So I think I'll probably just focus on doing what we do. Really.
The reason is, though, Gerard, it may well be that in actual fact, sorry, County Council, sorry to pick on them again, they might actually value money for something else other than trade-based skill jobs in their areas, which they might find it difficult to create and sustain.
That's right. And if you look at areas like Oxford and using some of our software tools, they've got negative unemployment in terms of that. So you do have to sort of think a little bit about this. So, okay, look, it's been an absolutely fantastic discussion. We're well over time, but what I normally do is ask my guests, can you just give me very, very quickly, very, very simple answer, please, a final question to both of you. I'll start with Stephen. What's your top tip that you think our listeners need to consider, whether they're a client or a user of the Construction Playbook? Your top tip.
I would say engage early and listen to the supply chain. They know what they're talking about.
Okay, engage early, supply chain involvement. Keith, what's your top tip?
Well, I think Stephen's just taken the two that were in my head. It has to be said, but I think both of those, and I think the other thing is don't be afraid to innovate.
Brilliant. So that's summarised all of the Construction Playbook in those two answers. So it just leaves me to say thank you to my guest, Stephen Wightman, the MMC lead of Faithful & Gould, and Keith Hayes, National Framework Director of Graham Construction. Thank you for listening. Please look out for all of our podcasts in this series. And thank you for listening to Pagabo and the Open University.